It's getting late, man, I wanna go home. Ain't no time for debate, man, I wanna go home. My mind's in the state, man, I wanna go home. I'm feeling closed in.
What's up, everybody? It's Soren Baker here on Unique Access Entertainment. As always, please hit that subscribe button right down there. It's free, enables us to keep coming to you guys as often as possible with as many interviews as possible. So please hit that subscribe button. We're on Cash App too if y'all want to donate to that, Unique Access ENT. But like our content, share it, talk about it, be about it, each one, teach one. And we appreciate you guys' support in getting us this far and letting us keep talking to all the icons of the game. And today, we have the honor and privilege of being joined again by Master Ace. Thanks for coming through, sir.
I'm a regular, yo. I'm a regular.
I know we gotta keep this going, Ace. But as Ace knows, and people that watch Unique Access know, my friends know, I think Ace is one of the best of all time. So I'm always very happy when I get to speak to him. And he just put out a very powerful song in tandem with Juneteenth, of course, Home in America, and we'll be talking about that a lot today. So Ace, as we get to the Home in America song and Juneteenth and the timing of it all, this is done in a concert with the Analog Players Society. So who are they and how did you get in touch with them?
I didn't know who they were until really this song, the idea for the song came up. My guy, Ben Rubin, reached out to me and, people reach out for a feature or verses or songs that they want to get me on all the time. And so when he first reached out, I was just looking at it like it was another, feature. And I was like, cool, we discussed the business or whatever. He sent me the beat. And I hear that he sent me actually multiple pieces of music. And they were all jazz, like real jazz kind of standard sounding things. And so I was like, yo, what is this? Like, give me a little bit more background on the music. And he said that essentially it's a collective of pretty well-known and established jazz musicians that he kind of pulled together as the curator of this project. And so he mentioned the different names of the musicians that he brought in. And he basically pulled them all together for a jam session and had them play a few different standards. And then the idea that he had was that he would take bits and pieces of this jam session with these jazz musicians and then sample it and then create kind of like rap joints off of it. And I was the first, person that he was going to try this experiment with. And I was like, wow, that's actually kind of cool. And I like the fact that he was asking me to kind of step out of my normal zone in terms of music and the style of music that I would normally rap to, because I always take those kinds of things as challenges. How can I create a record over something that isn't the typical boom bap vibe, but still is dope? And what do I say to this music? But that's how I found out about it, through Ben Rubin and him explaining how this music came about.
Okay. And then with Home in America, since this was a little bit of a different origin for you getting the music and the background of it, did they have that title? Did they send it to you as Home in America, or is that something you came up with?
Nah, the original beat was called Starry Nights, I think. And but that's just what the beat was called. And when I first heard the beat, I started writing this relationship joint. It was a song about me. I was trying to advise a friend about this girl that he liked, and I was actually trying to warn him about her because she, was one of these street girls that just all about the money and the this and the that. And at the end of the song, I end up with the girl. And it's I'm trying to help my friend deal with his relationship, and then she ended up with me. And it was something really different and cool, I thought, and I wrote this whole entire song to it, and I really liked it. And then when I played it for Ben, or when I sent it to Ben, he's like, man, what you wrote is really dope. But I was really hoping that you kind of did something more along the lines of, he mentioned American Me. which is a song from my album with Marco Polo, and I was like, wow, I wish you would have said that from the gate, because when I hear music, I go where it takes me at that moment. And that particular day, that's where it took me. It took me into this relationship lane. And I wrote that whole song. But after we had the conversation, he told me what he was hoping for, something that was a little bit more socially relevant to what was going on in the world today. And he wanted me to, tap into that. I said, okay. And I went back and I listened to it again. And I just started writing lines. And the Home in America part of it really didn't come until after the verses were done. And I was trying to figure out what the chorus was. And I just kind of decided that, this was this about, me wanting to get out of here? Because I would say for the most of the last probably couple of years, like I've been thinking and fantasizing about where else could I live if I really had to get up out of this joint. Where could I move? Like, and what would feel more like home than this place? And so that's kind of what I drew from. And so that's how the chorus was built. And then the actual title was kind of me and Ben kind of going back and forth. I knew I wanted America in there, and Home in America was his idea. I think I had something slightly different, but that's how the title worked out. It was just like kind of a back and forth with me and Ben.
Okay. And then with the flow, when you wrote it as a relationship song, did you have the same kind of slow, melancholy flow?
It was the same, because that's what the music kind of dictated to me. That kind of pacing. So yeah, it did have the same kind of cadence. But the mood was definitely different, because it was more of a storytelling thing. And so, yeah, I really I let the music take me where I feel like it wants me to go, and that's how the cadence comes down.
Okay. Now with the song itself, and the feel of it, and a lot of the heavy subject matter on there, I wanted to get into that. You referenced Strange Fruit, of course. So as you reflected and revamped the song, was that something you thought about right off the gate to reference that, or how did that?
So I had just watched the United States versus Billie Holiday, starring Andra Day, and that the movie kind of, in a certain way, revolved around that song, her singing that Strange Fruit song and being banned from singing it in certain venues and all of that. So that was like in the back of my mind, and that's how that lyric came about.
Okay. And I think it's, as we've talked about many times over the years, from when we first started doing interviews, it's sad that not only what you've talked about back in the 80s or 90s is still relevant, but even Billie Holiday was talking about decades ago is still relevant. And it's just sad and powerful all at the same time that movie, United States versus Billie Holiday, could come out now. And,
right.
It kind of it's a good juxtaposition of also what's going on in our country now.
Absolutely.
And all the broken promises that have been made to our country, especially the Black people. And in the first verse of Home in America, I wanted you to explain how you were saying the 40 acres takes a lot of patience. So what did you mean by that?
Well, the promise of 40 acres and a mule, that the United States government wrote down on paper and said that this is what each citizen was going to be entitled to coming out of slavery, and that promise was never followed through. And I feel like all these years later, we're still waiting on that promise to be fulfilled. Clearly, it's not going to be fulfilled. Had it been fulfilled, society in the United States would be a lot different, specifically for Black people, because you would have been giving them an opportunity to have wealth, to have ownership of something. But because they didn't fulfill that promise, we're still talking about reparations all these years later.
Yeah. And to that point, later in the song, you talk about the guy getting locked up who didn't commit the crime, but he could have been a doctor. As somebody I know from talking to you so much, it seems like these type of things you think about, but when we also realize from murder to false, bogus incarceration, these generations of, in particular, Black men, but of course, Black women and other minorities, the loss of opportunity, the loss of jobs, the loss of brilliance that we've had in our society. When you think about that stuff, how do you kind of reconcile that, but also keep in mind that it happens and all this stuff we've lost?
I can't reconcile it. I haven't reconciled it. The fact, knowing that there are probably brilliant doctors, lawyers, scientists, creators, inventors, musicians that have spent better part of their lives in jail and are still locked up bothers me, because, you know, just statistically, there has to be some people locked up that would have been amazing, brilliant students that would have, who knows, changed the world for the better, done something incredibly, you know, amazing to help society, but they never got that opportunity because they were pushed towards the prison industrial, you know, complex at such an early age that they never came to be what they could have been. So they start locking us up at 12 and 13 years old for the smallest things, and it takes those young people off the path of doing something great later on in their lives. And so, yeah, I can't reconcile that because it's still happening to this day.
Yeah, I mean, it's a obvious and a easy example, but just imagine if Malcolm X never got out of prison. You know, it would have been just, that's obviously a very obvious and huge example, but that's clearly something that could have happened, and we would have not had his powerful contributions and incredible insight in the world. You know,
Absolutely.
Then as you go on in the second verse, you talk about going to the Capitol and kind of reimagining that scenario that happened in January of 2021 this year. So where did you get that idea to kind of reframe that?
You know, the last few years in particular, but I mean, it's kind of always been the case, but more relevant the last few years. I see these scenarios happening around the country, and I can't help but immediately use the phrase, but if that were a white person instead of a Black person, it would have been this, or vice versa. And I hate that I have to constantly keep going to that, but there's just too many examples that are too obvious and too clear what the result would have been and how different the outcome would have been had the people doing a particular act been Black as opposed to being white, or vice versa. So yeah, when I saw the January 6th, you know, riots, I'm just sitting there going, if this was Fruit of Islam, and you know what I'm saying, and they were up there armed with, you know, weapons and knives and guns and bombs, and you know, they were, you know, storming the Capitol doors, breaking windows, climbing through, running through the rotunda. It would have been so much bloodshed. It would probably have been the worst massacre in the history of the country, because I'm watching these police officers, these Capitol police officers, who have weapons and are not using them. They use their mace, but they used their mace after shit was just so out of hand, and they, you know, they started to use batons and mace. And I know that one woman got shot or whatever, but keep in mind, they're deep inside the building already. Like, they were trying to actually breach the floor of the Senate at that point. Like, that's where they were at that point. Like, we're not only we in the building, but we're about to go through the doors. And the only reason she probably got shot is because there were still Congress people in that room that they couldn't allow that room to get breached. But I just know that Fruit of Islam doesn't get, I don't think Fruit of Islam gets to the steps. How about that? They don't even make it to the steps.
I agree. And I think that that's obviously an egregious inequality that we have. But it also makes me think, I want to get your perspective on this too, because I agree and I think all that's true. But what has changed from the time when the Black Panthers went in with guns and all that stuff into courthouses and did stuff? Granted, that wasn't in D.C., but they did stuff. And even when I read about it, knowing the history of our country, when I read about it and then would see the videos of it, I just couldn't believe they got it.
away with it.
Yeah. So what do you think is different, or why? What happened to where they didn't all get killed?
Great question. That was the '60s. I don't know. I don't know that answer. Because I was very young. I don't really know what the climate was at that time, and I'm guessing that there was something going on, societal wise, that they knew, the police knew they couldn't open fire, but I don't know exactly what that is. But I wouldn't trust testing that theory today. I know that.
Yeah, I wouldn't either. It just obviously things are nowhere near where they need to be in our society.
Here's what I'll say to answer that question.
Mhm.
Because at that time, when the Black Panthers were doing that, it was still very clear to the people in power that they were in power. There was no power struggle. There was no, they're just barking. They're little dogs down in the yard barking up at our window, but they can't do anything. Whereas now there are some white conservatives that really feel like their way of life, their position of power is truly being threatened. And now that's why opening fire would be a little bit more possible and plausible in today's society. Not to mention that, the racist ideals and the racism that has been, kind of simmering in a lot of people's souls has not been brought to the surface because of the last 4 years in the White House. So yeah, for those two reasons, I think it would be more likely that they would be opening fire now. Back then, they knew who was in power, and there was no real threat to that power. It was just more like a barking dog that they would just like kind of ignore. Yeah, let them get out of their system. They'll tire out and they'll go home. But they know that those days is over now, and so be a little different, I think.
Be sure to check out the History of Gangster Rap by Soren Baker. He's official.
History of Gangster Rap features exclusive interviews with Ice-T, Snoop Dogg, MC Ren, the D.O.C, and dozens of others. The History of Gangster Rap, a definitive look at how Los Angeles changed rap forever.
In Los Angeles, the streets definitely set the tone of the hip-hop music.
At 19, I got a $50,000 car.
My whole angle always was, I'll be street, but I will always tell you the horrors that go along with this life.
There will be penalties and casualties for just wearing the wrong color in somebody's neighborhood.
And once gangster rap made it from the streets to the TV, the genre exploded.
With Fab 5 on Yo MTV Raps with NWA.
Yo MTV, it just catapulted us from being local heroes to national gangbang rappers.
The History of Gangster Rap discusses it all from 1980 up till today.
It's always gonna be shit happening in the streets. You know what I mean? So it's always gonna be something to talk about.
The History of Gangster Rap in stores now.